but I think this guy's got some pretty good background and research. Dr. Jonathan Levy, professor at Norwich University. Sir, thank you for joining us. Tell us, because, in a 3-minute newscast, we only played part of it. It's not very clear exactly what's going on. Boil it down for us, and why are you 9-10 years later still in a lawsuit with the Vatican?
Well, yeah, thanks for that introduction, Alex. But, we've been in federal court for 10 years now. We filed the lawsuit in 1999 seeking return of Nazi gold from the Vatican Bank, and the Vatican has tried every legal trick in the book to get that case out of there, including going to the U.S. ambassador to the Vatican, going to Condoleezza Rice, and we've hung in there, and we're still continuing.
Okay, well, give us a boil down of the Vatican, the Nazis, what happened with the gold, how this ties into the Illuminati, how this ties into Vatican intelligence operatives. What would that be, the Jesuits?
Right, Jesuits, Franciscans. In fact, we're suing the Franciscan order as well. But to start at the beginning, as World War II was wrapping up, a group from former Yugoslavia called the Ustasha, which ran the Nazi puppet government in Croatia, started evacuating all the gold and loot they had gotten from concentration camps, whose victims mainly were Serbs, Orthodox Christians, and they were welcomed at the Vatican. A 10-truck convoy of loot was driven into St. Peter's Square and deposited at the Vatican Bank in 1946. U.S. intelligence knew about it, but none of this came out until 1997 or 1998 when the U.S. State Department released information. And we followed it up after that point, did the research, got the declassified documents, sued the CIA to get the declassified documents, and filed a lawsuit in federal court for return of the gold or an accounting of what happened to it.
Well, obviously the Nazis had robbed much of Russia and Western Europe, the Mediterranean, and just unbelievable art, huge salt mines full of gold, diamonds, Rembrandts, and a lot of it disappeared to the U.S., the Russians, but also, as you were reporting, the Vatican. Continue with your lawsuit, the documents you got, where this money went, where these Nazis went, or these Nazi puppets went, and how this ties in to the Vatican Bank and that news piece we just played part of dealing with the Illuminati.
Sure. To cut to the chase on the Illuminati, how do you move literally tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars worth of gold after the end of the Second World War, when you know it's contraband, Italy's occupied by the U.S. Military? Well, you do it in connection with some very powerful folks. And people in the CIA, Jim Angleton, who went on to be head of CIA counterintelligence, was involved. British intelligence, the MI6, was involved with this plot. And it leads up into current banking at the Vatican Bank, going on into the Calvi murder and up into the 1990s with the breakup of Yugoslavia. Who financed all that? Who bought the arms for the Croatians? Where did the money come from? And we know
the Croatians had actually served the Nazis, for those that don't know, and the Serbs, I'm not playing sides here, it's just facts, were asking Madeleine Albright, whose family they saved, including her, why are you doing this to us? And they just laughed at them. But I'm glad you know the history. That's why researching your stuff, it's so accurate for my own research. It's good to find somebody out there who knows more than I do. I don't know that much, but who is actually accurate. Now, understanding all of this, I want to go through some of the history of that and bring it up to today. But how much loot does the Vatican have from their exploits worldwide? And is it true that they hoard a lot of it in Vatican City itself?
Oh, that's a great question, and we found out the answer to that. In suing the Vatican Bank, we forced them to give up information about how they operate. Now, what they'll tell you is that they aren't really a bank. Well, it's probably true. They're more like a fencing operation masquerading as a bank. Their charter says that they can take all property, movable and immovable. Well, that's just about everything you can think of, any sort of valuable. Painting, a gold brick, antiquities, whatever you want to bring in there. The key to getting something into the Vatican Bank is the magic words, church property. If you can turn your loot, your stolen property, into church property, it goes in the front door at the Vatican Bank and out the back door. And the Nazis aren't the only ones who have done it. The Mafia has used the Vatican Bank for years, and a fella who I've been in contact, Marty Frankel, who's sitting in a federal prison in Texas for his part in the disappearance between somewhere of $50 million and $250 million of insurance money. All went into the Vatican Bank.
I mean, really, doesn't the Vatican operate kind of like one of these, the Cayman Islands or the Bahamas, or the way the Swiss do? The Swiss are the armorers for the Vatican, historically, are their bankers. The City of London itself, I mean, all of these little special incorporations all have histories of this, don't they? But I don't think anybody has a history quite as deep and serious as the Vatican.
Well, they're pretty serious, and the reason is, of course, they have diplomatic immunity. Archbishop Marcinkus, that little piece from Phoenix was about, lived in Sun City. He was a criminal. He was wanted by the Italian authorities, but no one could touch the man because he had diplomatic immunity conferred upon him by the smallest country in the world, the Holy See.
So that goes back to the old thing of sanctuary.
Well, it's sanctuary, but it also goes to sovereignty. Remember, the Pope wears three hats. He's head of the church, he's the Prince of Vatican City, and he's head of a sovereign entity called the Holy See, which has diplomatic relations with well over 150 countries, and therefore diplomatic immunity.
Did you see how the Vatican refuses to pay Italy their power bills? I mean, again, I'm not hearing a Vatican bashing fest. It just needs to be looked at. Is there any idea how great the wealth of the Vatican is, or is that a secret? Well,
it's not a secret. The Vatican will come out with some phony figures every year saying they're worth about $24 million. But the wealth is unbelievable, and it's what we've discovered in just suing the Franciscan order. Was that at one address in California, at one little address at one monastery in California, 24 different corporations were registered. Now, you add that up from place to place, and there are literally tens of thousands of entities masquerading as independent entities that are all really the Catholic Church.
Amazing, Mr. Levy. I want to come back in the next segment and get into the Vatican banker getting hung, and you call it the Illuminati. I mean, is that just another name for secret society or mafia? I mean, what is Illuminati to you?
Illuminati is a secret society, but it's not just a secret society. It's a secret society that uses spiritual warfare, and not just economic, but spiritual warfare as well.
You mean they believe that, or they use the religion to control people? What are you saying?
Well, I think there is such a thing as good and evil, and as others have said, we look at warfare, and you have political warfare, economic warfare, and there's another dimension, which is spiritual warfare. And some things are done that are just so evil and contrary to humanity that you'd have to say it goes beyond mere economics and politics.
All right. Well, we're getting a window into somebody who's been suing the Vatican for 10 years, since 1999. He is Dr. Jonathan Levy, professor at Norwich University in the field of terrorism, of all things. He's been one of the most successful people ever in suing them. We'll come back and find out more.
You're listening to GCN, the world leader in independent talk radio.
As you look at all these different power structures around the planet, I'm going to talk about this once our guest is gone. They all at the top nexus in with other elites, and I think it's key to see the overall global crime syndicate of these little nation states and these little private corporate systems. The District of Columbia is its own private corporation now. This is how things are done inside the New World Order system. Going back to our guest with the website VaticanBankClaims.com, and big news blitz coming up in your calls, VaticanBankClaims.com. Okay, I mean, there's so much. We got to have you back up in the future to spend a whole hour with us, sir, and take phone calls, but in the limited time today, I mean, there's no doubt the Vatican admits a lot of the Nazi loot went to them. And then you were getting into Serbia and the Croats, who, for those that don't know, they were the puppets for the Nazis, and all the stuff there. And then who financed, the takeover of Serbia. You're saying that's the Vatican. Break that down.
Well, absolutely. There's no question that Croatia received its funding from the Vatican or Vatican financiers in 1990, 1991. And that's where we think a lot of the Nazi loot went to eventually, to break up Yugoslavia, which was, after all, the goal of the Germans, of the Vatican, and of the Croatians.
And why was that their goal?
Well, think about it. Yeah, you know history, Alex. Who killed the Austrian Archduke in 1914 and caused the fall of all the empires?
Well, that was the Black Hand tied in with the Vatican and British intelligence, is what I read.
Yes, but it was they blame the Serbs for that, ostensibly. Yes. Yeah, and of course that's why the Serbs have always been on the chopping block there in the Balkans. That's the excuse, at least. And, of course, the excuse, again, for breaking up Yugoslavia, turning it into a bunch of mini-states. But we aim to see, where did this money go to and what was it used for? And to correct you there, no, the Vatican does not admit that it ever took any Nazi gold. They'll do everything possible but to admit to any kind of wrongdoing.
Well, they even say Ratzinger wasn't a Hitler Youth, though, so it's kind of getting ridiculous.